Hello and welcome to episode number 194. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com and I am Cornelius Fichtner. Nice to have you with us. This is a premium episode reserved to our premium members, which means that because you are listening to it, you are a premium member and you are supporting us by paying a small subscription fee. Thank you very much for helping us cover our various production costs. Bill Duncan from pmpartners.com is back in this episode. When I asked him what topic he would like to focus on in this second interview, he immediately pointed me to his article, Defining and Measuring Project Success. In this article, and of course in the interview that you'll hear in just a moment, Duncan gives us his outstanding view of what success means, what is wrong with the way that we define success on projects today, and what success dimensions and approaches he suggests that we start applying to our projects today in order to improve measuring success. We also look at what you can do today on your ongoing projects to check if you measure success properly and what you can do in order to improve the measurement criteria on your ongoing project. And now, as you have successfully reached the end of the introduction, enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview. Today with William Duncan, Principal of Project Management Partners.
Hello, Duncan. Welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
And hello, Cornelius. It's a pleasure to be back.
So, we want to talk about project success, defining and measuring it. How do you define success in general?
Well, I like success is one of those words that have lots of definitions. One of the things I like to joke about is there is, in fact, a city in Arkansas, I believe, called Success. So that's one definition, but probably not one that we're going to use in projects. If we look at the dictionary definition, success as the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. And I think that's what we're looking at in the project management environment as well. The issue, I think, with projects is that we really have two separate aims, and those two separate aims need to be understood as separate and need to be defined and measured separately.
Okay, what are those aims?
Right. Now, I use the term product success and project management success.
I see.
So let's start with the easier one, which is project management success. That's the one that most people, or certainly most of your listeners, most project managers are probably most familiar with. And that's the old triple constraint or iron triangle, which said, did we deliver this project, not necessarily on time, but at least within an acceptable time frame? Did we deliver it for an acceptable cost? And did we deliver what the customer had asked for? So did we satisfy the specifications that were given to us or developed by us as part of the project? I typically add a fourth dimension to that, and that's stakeholder satisfaction. Stakeholder satisfaction basically says, would you do this again with the same group of people? I had a client once several years ago when I asked them to define success, who told me, and this is as close to as an exact quote as I can remember, said, in this organization, in this department, at this point in time, a successful project is any project in which any two team members are still on speaking terms.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I wish I could make some of this stuff up. So I like to include that stakeholder satisfaction as a fourth dimension, as a balance on the other three in terms of measurement. If you are meeting your cost and schedule and scope objectives by abusing the team or by ignoring the requests for change that are emanating from your sponsor or your user group, then I would argue that you are not being successful as a project manager. So including that stakeholder satisfaction piece is important, I think, to the definition of project management success.
Okay. I'd like to take a quick detour here, and I promise to everyone we will come back to these various dimensions because there is one project that you mentioned in an article which embodies both success and failure at the same time. It's the Sydney Opera House. Why that particular project?
Okay, well, a couple of reasons. I fell in love with the Sydney Opera House when I first saw a photo of it many years ago. I've been to Sydney several times, and in my iPhoto files, I probably have 300 or 400 photos of the Opera House from every angle. It's a spectacular civic symbol. It sits on a point right next to downtown Sydney. It's got this beautiful bridge behind it. If you look at it from the bridge side, it has a fabulous park on the other side of it, with green and flowers and all that sort of stuff. So as a product, it's a wonderful success. If you watch the Olympics in Sydney a few years ago, every time they broke away from the event, what did they show you? They showed you a picture of the Sydney Opera House. I mean, it's just a truly spectacular piece of architecture. However, it was 1,400% over budget. Depending upon how you count, the original budget for the project was 7 million Australian dollars. The actual delivered cost for the project, again, depending upon who you believe and how you count and whether or not you adjust for inflation, is somewhere between 111 and 114 million Australian dollars. The projected schedule was 3 years. It took nearly 10. The problems with the Opera House brought down the government of New South Wales, the Australian state where it was being built, and whose government had authorized it. So if you look at the project management process, how can you conceivably call something like that a success? But the product itself, fabulous.
Right. And you've nicely managed to integrate those two dimensions again, the product success and the project management success. So if those are our two dimensions that we are supposed to be measuring, what are we generally doing wrong today on our projects in regards to measuring success?
Well, I would probably say there are two things. The first thing is I think most project managers are focusing on the things that are more under their control. Now, cost, schedule, scope, and stakeholder satisfaction, which are the four dimensions that I look at for project management success, may not be completely under the project manager's control, but they're certainly more under their control than the product success elements are. So I think what a lot of project managers do is say, I can't deal with product success. It's not part of my job. It's not my responsibility. So I'm not even going to think about it. Let somebody else worry about it. I'm going to get this thing done on time, on budget, and according to spec. Full stop. So not thinking about the things that you're not directly responsible for, I think, is the first problem that I see a lot of project managers doing. When I talk to them about defining product success, they start to get real nervous and they say, but I can't control that. I can't influence that. And I say, you're right, you can't directly, but you can certainly influence it by how you run the project, by what you actually deliver. So you have to be aware of it as part of your responsibilities as project manager. The second thing, I think, is taking the time to actually define the success metrics. And then, as let's call it a 2A, perhaps, is doing a good job of how you define them so that they're clear and measurable. The fact of the matter is that every project manager is going to be measured. And if you as a project manager do not take responsibility for defining what those measures are, it means you may be measured against things that you don't like. You may be measured against things that weren't what you were striving for. Let me segue into the 2A part of that. How do we define success? I'll use schedule as an example because it's not necessarily an easy one, but it's something that most people are familiar with. Typically, if I ask somebody to define schedule success, they will to define a schedule success measure, they will say the project was completed on time. I start asking questions. Well, what does on time mean? Well, we have a date. I'll say, all right, well, if you're 1 day late, is that a problem? Sometimes the answer is yes. Other times the answer is no, 1 day isn't really a problem. So immediately that illustrates that if on time is understood as by the defined schedule date, that really isn't your measure. Your measure is really perhaps within a week of the defined schedule date, within a month of the defined schedule date. Quite frequently, organizations will impose schedule dates on projects that are earlier than what's really needed because they expect the project to be late, so they try and create pressure. And they figure if we ask you to get done 3 months ahead of time, maybe you will actually get done on time, or maybe you will actually have it finished when we need it. So thinking about how I am going to measure this particular factor is the second issue that you need to do. And you need to have agreement from the stakeholders that that's how they're going to measure it as well. One of my favorite examples of schedule success criteria came from the IT department of a major university that was responsible for doing all the wiring to support a new student union, so the students could have Ethernet access. I think it was mostly Ethernet at the time. This is several years ago. So they defined their success as we must have all of the cabling installed at least 1 month before the student union opens. So what they had basically was a relative schedule measure. It says if the construction schedule is accelerated, we must accelerate our schedule as well, or we will not be seen as successful. The fact that we agreed to August 31st and then they decide to open the student union on August 1st, we can't say we're successful because all the students are going to know is that they don't have access to the web. At the same time, it says if the construction schedule gets delayed, and in fact the construction schedule did get delayed, it says we can delay the installation of the wiring as well. We don't have to kill ourselves to hit August 31st, which is the current target, if we find out that the opening is going to be delayed till November.
That makes enormous sense, obviously. In regards to these project success measures, is there any one that is your personal favorite?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to say the one that I always start out with is no overtime. That's a stakeholder success measure. And an awful lot of my clients are involved in IT and software development. And when I suggest that a success measure is not working overtime, people look at me with eyes crossed and say I'm a dreamer and a theorist and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm usually willing to compromise and allow them to specify no scheduled overtime as a success criteria. But I really think that if they started with no overtime, it does a couple of things. If you get your other stakeholders, in particular, if you get your sponsor and your funders to agree that you're not going to be working overtime, then when it comes time to look at things like schedules and budgets and staffing levels, you're saying, hey guys, we agreed that no overtime was a success criteria. If we're going to make this arbitrary date that you've imposed, the only way we can do that is by working overtime. And we've agreed that we're not going to work overtime. So let's start talking options. One option, of course, is to modify the success criteria. But if you're applying change control to the success criteria, as you should be, then you're getting people to buy into it and say, hey, I understand we're abusing the team here, that we're asking the team to work extra hours, particularly in many white-collar environments, pharmaceuticals, IT, almost all the technology fields where your team members are not getting paid overtime. As far as I'm concerned, if you're expecting somebody to work 60 hours a week in order to meet a schedule, you're abusing them. And apart from any question of success criteria, I think that's morally and ethically improper. And yet we've come to accept it as normal behavior in the technology field.
Mm-hmm. If this was your favorite project success measure, do you have one that is at the other end, your least favorite project success measure?
Yep, I'll go back to the one I mentioned before, on time.
On time, okay.
Saying on time is meaningless. It can't be measured. You don't know what people are thinking about. It does not communicate. It doesn't tell you whether it's okay, for example, to extend the schedule in return for additional scope. It does not give you the input into decision-making that you need. Let me just focus on that one to make sure it's clear. If I say my success criteria is on time, Once again, what does that mean? How do I measure it? If we've decided that we're going to be done by August 31st for whatever reason, perhaps it was developed as part of our scheduling activity, perhaps it was a date that was imposed on us, and somebody comes to us in, let's say, the middle of March with a wonderful idea that will significantly affect the business case, that will allow us to triple the benefits to the organization if we incorporate this item into the project that we're currently working on. But in order to incorporate it, we're going to need to delay the completion date from August 31st until September 30th. Is that, in fact, acceptable? If you just say on time, you don't know. If you say by the agreed schedule date, incorporating adjustments made in response to approved scope changes, then it becomes very clear that you are still successful if you delay the project's completion until the end of September, if you did it in response to an acceptable scope change. And it's supporting that kind of intelligent, coherent decision-making that having defined measurable success criteria provides for you.
Okay, let me try and get into your brain a bit here and try to identify how you figure out whether or not a success measure is good or bad, because every project is different and therefore has to be measured possibly slightly differently in regards to the success measures. So how do you design a success measure for your projects and make sure that they are, quote unquote, good measures?
Okay, the first thing that I do is I encourage people to use a very specific format for developing the success criteria. I like them to start off by saying this project will be successful if, and it kind of focuses the attention. Then we have a measurable item. What is it that we're trying to measure? Is it, for example, schedule performance? Is it budget? What is the issue? Comparison statement is the next piece, greater than, less than, equal to, and then finally a specific value. So if you fill in all of those pieces, then you have a better chance of having a success criteria that will in fact be clear and understandable. For example, actual costs, that's my measurable item, are within, that is the comparison statement, 10% of the approved budget. So now what I'm telling my team is that plus or minus 10% is acceptable. You can go over budget by a little bit if you need to in order to satisfy schedule or cost objectives. If I look at a product success criteria, I might have something that says annual maintenance costs are reduced by at least $500,000. So annual maintenance cost is the measurable item, are reduced by at least is the comparison statement, and then 500,000 is the measure. So somebody, some months, a year after the project, should say, hey, as a result of this project, how much are we spending on maintenance? And did this project, in fact, satisfy its product success criteria? In addition to the 4 categories of project management success, cost, schedule, specifications, and the stakeholder experience, I generally look at 4 categories of product success as well. So there's the bottom line impact. Are we saving money or making more money? There's operational impact, which is are we getting more efficient or improving our operational statistics? Balanced scorecard would be great input to that. Is there market impact? Sometimes what I'm looking for is market share, and I'm assuming that the bottom line and impact will follow from market share, or there may simply be intellectual value. For example, I might be doing a project primarily to get experience with a new technology. And in terms of product success, I don't really care whether this application that I'm developing actually provides direct benefit to the organization. The benefit that I'm expecting to get out of it is I'll have half a dozen team members who understand how this new technology works so that we can apply it to larger, more complex projects that may, in fact, help the organization.
All right. When I'm closing these interviews, what I'm usually trying to do is help people on their current projects so that they can do something with what they have heard and learned today. And so here's possibly my most difficult question for you. Many of these listeners, they have ongoing projects, and they have goals that they have approved, possibly in the project charter, in the project management plan. What can they do now? Their projects are already ongoing, possibly measures have already been agreed upon. Is there anything that they can do to go back, review these measures, see where they are in order to improve in the future their project, to understand, was it a success or was it not a success?
Great question. And I think it would be a fun exercise for any project manager who doesn't actually have success criteria to go look at those goals and objectives and see if they can convert them into the format that I gave you. This project will be successful if. Can they rewrite that objective statement so that it has a measurable item, a comparison statement, and a specific numeric metric? There has to be a number that I can use to measure, whether it's 10% or whatever the number might be, 500,000 in the two examples that I gave you. So if they were to look at those objectives, try and write them in measurable terms, and potentially go back to their sponsor or other stakeholders as might be appropriate within the project and say, is this in fact how we should be measuring success? Would you consider a 10% budget overrun to be acceptable? Would you consider a 1-month schedule delay to be acceptable? Have I in fact captured your measurements? Have I in fact captured your thinking in such a way to help guide my behavior through the rest of this project?
Wonderful. Duncan, once again, thank you very much for your time, for your expertise, and for your tips here on the Project Management Podcast.
And once again, my pleasure.
And that was Bill Duncan on defining and measuring project success. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a PMP or a PGMP and you're looking for a simple and effective way to earn your PDUs, then try the PDU podcast. It's just as easy as the podcast you're listening to right now. Get new webinars and at least one new PDU every month on autopilot. Stop by at pducast.com. That's pducast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this, a project management truism that fits nicely with today's topic. The single best payoff in terms of project success comes from having a good project definition early. Until next time.